Hi everyone. In this part 1 video, we will discuss about the transport of oxygen and carbon dioxide in peripheral tissue. When the oxygenated blood reaches the peripheral tissue from the lung, it will always unload the oxygen in the blood into the peripheral tissue and load the carbon dioxide from the peripheral tissue into the blood. Both of the transport process, no matter the release of the oxygen or the uptake of the carbon dioxide into the blood, will always occur simultaneously. They occur at the same time, and both processes also involve the hemoglobin. So this will mean that at the beginning, when the oxygenated blood reaches the peripheral tissue, inside the red blood cell, it will be full with this oxyhemoglobin, while in the plasma, it will be loaded with a lot of the oxygen molecule. For the transport of the oxygen in the peripheral tissue, it involves the unloading of the oxygen into the peripheral tissue. And this unloading process will normally involve two pathways. The first pathway, which is also the major and most important pathway, would be unloading of the oxygen by the oxyhemoglobin. So in this first pathway, the oxyhemoglobin will dissociate to release the oxygen gas and also the hemoglobin. This is mainly due to the lower pH, due to the lower partial pressure of the oxygen, and also the higher partial pressure of the carbon dioxide in the environment of the peripheral tissue. All of these will cause the dissociation of the oxyhemoglobin in the red blood cell to release the oxygen and hemoglobin. This hemoglobin will later used for the transport of the carbon dioxide. Now we look back at this oxygen gas. The oxygen gas, once it is being released from the oxyhemoglobin, it will diffuse out of the blood into the peripheral tissue. So same thing goes to the second pathway. The oxygen molecule that occurs in the plasma will also diffuse out of the blood into the peripheral tissue down the concentration gradient. And with that, that is how the transport of the oxygen, the unloading of the oxygen into the peripheral tissue occurs. On the other hand, for the transport of the carbon dioxide, it will involve the loading of the carbon dioxide into the blood. And this loading of carbon dioxide into the blood at the peripheral tissue will involve three pathways. The first pathway is to load the carbon dioxide and carry it as the bicarbonate ion. The second pathway is to bind with the hemoglobin and form the carbaminohemoglobin. And the third pathway is to remain inside the plasma and to remain inside the plasma as the carbon dioxide molecule. So we will look at the first pathway, which is also the most important and the major pathway. When the carbon dioxide diffuse into the blood and diffuse into the red blood cell, this carbon dioxide will bind with the water molecule inside the red blood cell. This reaction is catalyzed by the enzyme carbonic anhydrase and form the carbonic acid molecule, the H2CO3. And again, due to the carbonic anhydrase, this carbonic acid molecule will almost immediately dissociate to become the two ion, the bicarbonate ion and also the hydrogen ion. So these bicarbonate ion and the hydrogen ion will be carried in the red blood cell, but this will also create two problems. First problem is that too much of the hydrogen ion accumulating inside the red blood cell is going to lower the pH, causing the cytoplasm of the red blood cell to be too acidic, and this will destroy the red blood cell. Second problem is that this bicarbonate ion need to be carried in the plasma. So that's why we will need two more processes in order to solve these two problems. So to solve the problem of this accumulation of the hydrogen ion, the hemoglobin that is released from the oxyhemoglobin just now will now act as the buffer. So they will act as the buffer to bind with this hydrogen ion and form the HHB, the hemoglobinic acid. So by doing this, it prevents too much of the hydrogen ion inside the red blood cell and making the cytoplasm to be acidic. So the second process would be the bicarbonate ion. The bicarbonate ion will be transported out of the red blood cell and carry as bicarbonate ion in the plasma towards the lung. Now the problem is the bicarbonate ion is negatively charged. When there are more and more bicarbonate ion being transported out of the red blood cell, the cytoplasm of the red blood cell will become positively charged because they lost too much of the negatively charged ion. So in order to compensate this loss of the negative ion, the chloride ion will be transported in exchange of the bicarbonate ion. So with that, the chloride ion, which is also negatively charged, will compensate the loss of the bicarbonate ion and thus restore the electrical charge inside the red blood cell. And this whole process, the exchange of the chloride ion and the bicarbonate ion, is called the chloride sieve. So with that, that is how the first pathway actually works in order to load the carbon dioxide into the blood. But for second pathway, where the percentage is lower than the first pathway, the second pathway is loading the carbon dioxide into the red blood cell by binding them with the hemoglobin. So the carbon dioxide, once they diffuse into the red blood cell, some of them will bind with the hemoglobin that is being released by the oxyhemoglobin just now and form the HbCO2, the carbaminohemoglobin. And that will mean that this carbon dioxide will be carried as the carbaminohemoglobin inside the red blood cell. And lastly, the third pathway, some of the carbon dioxide, after diffuse into the plasma, they will stay as the carbon dioxide molecule in the plasma and being carried to the lung. So with these three pathways, the carbon dioxide are being loaded into the blood and carried towards the lung. So that means that when the blood leaving the peripheral tissue towards the lung, inside the red blood cell, it will be having a lot of the HHB, hemoglobinic acid. It will contain a lot of the carbaminohemoglobin, HbCO2. While in the plasma, it will contain a lot of the bicarbonate ion and also the carbon dioxide molecule.